I also find that the responsibility to tell the story is in a way that people listen is on me. It's not my audience's responsibility to listen. We live busy lives in a busy world, and I don't expect people to be preoccupied with, what's happening with the protests in Georgia or, sadly, the war here or the war in Gaza. People don't have the bandwidth. So I think it's up to journalists and to the media to connect the dots and really explain how something that happens in these remote places connects to them and affects their lives too.
Hi, my name is Christopher Atwood. Welcome to Halcom, a series from Ukrainer International where we speak with experts from around the world about the underlying dynamics that shape our times and our understanding of global events. Today, we are speaking with Natalia Antelava. She's a journalist and media entrepreneur. She is the co-founder and editor-in-chief of Coda Story, an award-winning newsroom that explores how power operates in the 21st century. She's also the co-founder of ZEG, a global storytelling network that brings together journalists, artists, and thinkers to break down barriers and to try to make sense of our fragmented world. Natalia, thank you very much for joining us. We're very, very happy to have you. Um, I kind of want to start our conversation from like a place of, I like to always start with a place of personal connection. And so we've been on a panel together in 2023 at Knižkov Arsenal in Kiev with Volodymyr Yarmolenko, who is like a good friend of mine. Yeah, I told you then, I appreciate the work that Coda Story has been doing for a long time. I worked in advocacy. I used those materials all the time. I really viewed it as like, and I still view it as like a very like spiritually like related project to Ukrainer and to like my own like intellectual interests. But like looking through your background, right? Like you start off as a correspondent for CNN,
BBC.
BBC. You start off as a correspondent for BBC. I saw red. You start off as a correspondent for BBC, and you kind of grow from there, but you don't take the like your approach isn't just a standard journalism approach. How did you end up with like on this path of like very I would say because this is how I describe my own approach as like this kind of empathetic storytelling that like tries to connect audiences with like realities that they can, that make you actually feel something rather than just the facts that don't always mean anything to an audience.
Oh, I think I generally like people. So I think that's the really simple answer is that. And, I think in terms of storytelling itself, BBC was a really great training. I wasn't trained as a journalist. So it was, I think, broadcast television, especially, but radio as well, is really good at teaching you how to tell a story. That's both concise and grabs people, and if it's because you get like 15 seconds on the radio to like make someone pay attention. You get those few couple of minutes to get someone to keep watching. At least that's the way it used to be, obviously. There will be people watching this as
Yeah.
going blah, blah, blah for a long time. Apparently no longer needed. So, yeah, and I always thought that the best part of the job of being a reporter was the incredible privilege of talking to different people and getting to, legit like have legitimate reasons to be curious and getting to ask questions. And I think listening in itself is a very empathetic exercise. So I like to listen to people's stories and then figure out ways to tell them.
That really resonates with me. In particular, like yeah, the idea of like uh, this idea of like it's sincerity, really, right? It's like you actually like when you started with like I like people, and I'm interested in their stories. I feel like very often right now we live in a period where and speaks to like the importance of the kind of work that you do. We live in a period where people really don't feel like they're actually heard. Like they feel like when people listen to them, it's not really necessarily always very authentic. When I did a little bit of political organizing in 2024 and 2025, and when I spoke with voters, um, just by actually proactively asking them and showing an interest and like being like, I hear what you're saying, like I have similar problems. By building that connection, like you learn so much about people's lives, and they will share more and more interesting things than they otherwise would have shared if they don't get the feeling that you actually care. Is that
Yeah, I agree with all of it. I mean, in some ways, yeah, and I think it's also the fact that we don't do it as much as we used to. I always tell like our reporters to pick up the phone or better meet someone for a coffee because like nothing replaces that interaction. But I think it's a little bit of a byproduct of that age of noise that we live in. It's deafening, and it's so hard for both quality information and good stories to punch through. And the byproduct of that is the fact people don't feel heard. So yeah, I think it kind of gives us an extra layer of responsibility as journalists to listen more carefully and to make sure that we tell the stories that are like beyond the posturing that happens on social media. I came across this line, I'm sure it was on Instagram. Um, the Instagram wisdom or somewhere I came across this line that like everyone has aesthetics, no one has personality anymore, and I think that's kind of like adjacent, to that.
No, I mean, look, yeah, I fully see it. Also, I will tell you, like, I also have this sense of I come from like advertising and like communications background, where also like I would have a very short amount of time to tell a story, and it was for commercial purposes. And I also learned how easily you can manipulate people. And this actually kind of one of the pieces that you wrote, I think in 23. You referenced the like this like noise as like as a tool of propaganda, um, and like one thing that really resonated with me with your work was the idea that like guys, like you cannot fact check your way out of disinformation. There's too much of it. Like that's the entire purpose of it. You simply cannot. And also you can't treat it as a journalism problem. You can't treat it as just like fake news. You have to treat it as it's a communications campaign. When you think of it as a communications campaign, it makes perfect sense, and you do not respond to a communications campaign with just like,
Yeah, I don't agree with you that it's a communications campaign. Sadly, it's a lot more than that. It's the infrastructure of modern life. It's the in it like digital it's the become the very piping of our society. So if it were a campaign, we would not be in the
oh
deep
no,
shit that we are in now. But I also think, completely agree on the fake news. And like we very much kind of work off the back of like the underlying thesis that so many of us got, especially not to pick on the Western, like whatever the collective West, but that obsession with disinformation and disinformation kind of becoming a like an industry of its own, like just like the development was in the 1990s, right? Suddenly, like to mid 2000s, it was like always about disinformation and kind of centered the fake news as the main problem, whereas the real problem was always the noise. And I think of noise as the new form of censorship. That is, noise is what helps, Putin's, Orban's, and name them. There are more and more of them. Some of them, I know, look,
oh
Orban's out, but helps them kind of to advance these populist agendas.
no, well, I will just like name the elephant. So I'm and I tend to like point this out pretty frequently, and I feel kind of like an obligation to do it because editor in chief of Ukraine International, I am I'm speaking, um, like when people hear me speak on behalf of Ukrainer, by default, they view me as speaking on behalf of Ukraine entirely. And so that comes with a big responsibility of understanding my own role in the world. And I'm a white guy from Texas. I am white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. I am like the core of that identity group of kind of like this the whiteness. If we view it as something that expands and contracts, it will never contract beyond like it will never. I will never be excluded from whiteness. So I recognize that. Simultaneously, like I take the position that I think that like to some degree, um, when we're talking about the full scale invasion, like it's done on behalf of every Russian, whether that Russian wants it to be done on their behalf or not. And so I personally feel a sense of responsibility for any action that my government takes. So like even though I didn't vote for Trump, even though I actively tried to prevent his ascension to power, I didn't do enough. My other fellow, like I don't have the same amount of responsibility as people who voted for Trump and then joined ICE and then committed human rights violations, but I still have some amount of responsibility. So no, I completely feel that, and I also see, when I was preparing for a different interview, it was with a Taiwanese journalist, and when like I like double check some things through AI, like I'll get it to like to synthesize like different notes into like like what am I like focusing on with all of these notes that I'm writing kind of disparately. And when I put it into a Chinese large language model, there's no response. And like this, I have this very unsettling
That
sensation that this
try
is,
have you tried asking DeepSeek about Tiananmen Square?
oh yeah, deep seek.
Ask DeepSeek about Tiananmen Square and then January 6th. It's really interesting.
Yeah. So we have these big yeah, I mean, just like I think it speaks to your concern with noise, right? Because AI is a authoritarian's dream in terms of like producing more noise. So with your projects, with Coda Story, with Zeg Festival, what is your approach? Like how are we trying to cut through this noise and actually be noticed? Like what is it that you find resonates?
I would say three things. Really excellent storytelling and using every format possible. Human connection, which means a lot more of our journalism lives through the events that we do, ZEG, and we're expanding ZEG internationally. And at the core of all of our programming is the journalism that we do. And also radical collaboration. I think we need to figure out how to work together in ways that we've never worked together before to get the important stories, the attention that they deserve. I think we live in the world where we've um, confused we have always thought of the abundance of information leading to understanding, and I think it's like a big leap for our societies to understand that actually abundance of information has led us to the both confusion and kind of loss of collective meaning. And also, yeah. So like what and also that's what I was gonna say, and also the role of journalism, because journalism like always had that pathway, right? You investigate, you publish, and you let it blow up, right? The legislations are changed and presidents resign and all sorts of things happen, the Watergate and endless examples. And I think that pathway is broken. So I'm really convinced that we need to figure out ways to, um, because our ability as journalists to influence politics has been so undermined by the current shape of the current information ecosystem, that we need to figure out new ways to fulfill the role that we play in the society. And I think going upstream to culture is really, really important, and finding new allies and creating collaborations that were not possible before or that we didn't need before. So those three things: great storytelling, humans, humans is important and it's going to become more and more important, and radical collaboration.
I see that, and also I will say that like as you were speaking, I even kind of reminded myself that uh, like culture does not stay static and does not stay on a concrete trajectory. And like my instinct when you're saying everything, and through my own experience of storytelling and trying to connect with people emotionally, is that I get the feeling that as this becomes too much, as like authoritarians continue to flood the information space with just like so much stuff that like it has the effect of censorship, and even can cause people to self-censor in cases. You like culture will like respond to that, and artists will respond to that. And I have this feeling that with AI, with the way that AI is shaping language, like mistakes and like doing things that feel human. I think like I have hope for that, but it's kind of the pressure is that it's kind of. I mean, do you feel an additional sense of responsibility? Because like I kind of do, that like it's on people who have the ability to shape stories to show like to kind of help nudge culture to like.
Yeah, I've always felt a sense of responsibility because I always had a very clear understanding why I became a journalist. I was, I remember the collapse of the Soviet Union. I remember the chaos that followed. I was born in Tbilisi and raised in Tbilisi. I remember the importance of during the Soviet Union of the voice, like my mom listening to the crackling like Radio Free Europe and the BBC, and how important that information, because all we got right was fake news. So we were desperately needing something that helped people navigate their lives and figure out the truth. So I think this part of the world is pretty well prepared for um, the age of this information abundance and the new censorship. So for me, it was always about being that voice. It was always about journalism. Was always about helping people navigate the world and the complexities of the world. And at some point, I had the most amazing job at the BBC. I was with Foreign News for many years, and I went to the most incredible places and talked to, you know, uh, people that, I would never get to talk to. And I was like in a Burmese jungle one day and in the streets of Tehran the next, and it was great until I felt that I was no longer playing that role. Like I was no longer helping the viewers get any clarity because the way that the news machine works is it really treats information as incremental pieces rather than in context and continuity. And the reason I left the BBC and set up Coda was very much to figure out how can journalism serve that purpose of context, of creating context and continuity, and ultimately being sort of an orientation system for people. And I think, yeah, and in that way, I think obviously culture like plays the same role, artists, and I think we face a very similar threat as well. I think anything that deals with complexity, whether it's journalism, art, humanities in general, everything is being flattened. Complexity is being flattened in the world. So, um, yeah, that I there is a lot. I think there is a lot for journalists to do, and there is a real role that we can play in kind of being the translators and being the navigators and helping people um,
Yeah.
through. I would also add that another thing where I feel responsibility in general, I think it really is. Uh, Change always happens in the periphery, like change always happens on the edges. And it's very hard for the center to understand periphery. It's easy to understand periphery if you come from it. I come, I mean, no one feels like they're from a periphery because your world is the center of the world always. But it's how I think it's really important for for journalism to reflect those peripheral voices. And I kind of talk about all sorts of periphery, right? Whether it's ideological periphery or geographical periphery or like any sort.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Like that's where the front lines are of understanding.
I mean, I think your last point kind of goes to the like this misconception that people have about identity as like some kind of like concrete single thing. Like identity, like identity is very subjective and very like personal, and the identity that we like ascribe to ourselves or that we view on someone else or from someone else can be very, very, very different. And so, yeah, no, I totally agree that the periphery can exist in a lot of different formats. Um, like I am curious, so from Georgia, like obviously you've done a lot, yeah, a lot around the world. So you like, do you think that your background in Georgia, combined with like these experiences of like actually going to places and interacting with people, like, it's kind of an obvious question, right? But how did that shape the way that you do things now? Because I mean, just the reason I'm asking is that in my situation, even as like I said, like WASP guy from Texas, um, all of the places I've been, whether that was in like public housing in New York City or in I lived in Donetsk in 2011. I've been to like provincial areas in Russia. I was in Moscow for a while. I was in Kiev. I was in like I said, Donetsk, and I've been all around. Um, it really helped shape like actually talking to people and actually like interacting with like the real humans, not just the like theory that we learn. It really changed how I interact with the world and how I approach journalism itself. Like I can only imagine the degree to which like your experience at BBC, as someone who is Georgian, like how that would have shaped you.
Of course, it shaped me massively. But mm, I think being from the background that I was also shaped the kind of reporter that I was, right? It shaped my experiences inside the BBC. The BBC shaped me. I mean, that's what happens in life, right? We're shaped by where we come from. We're shaped by the lives that we live. So yeah, definitely.
My big question is how do we explain to how do we explain these realities to people who live in the like who live in the center? Because, for example, right, you mentioned growing up in Georgia, and you just had the propaganda from the Soviet Union. But the thing is that from Westerners, so I finished the Herman Institute. It was the first institute of Sovietology created in conjunction with the CIA, and there was the whole field of Sovietology, and then the Soviet Union collapsed. And there was a beautiful quote by Alexander Mutil, Ukrainian American professor. He had a reflection on this period at the end of the Soviet Union, where he said that in Sovietology, you could be an expert in Russians, or you could be an expert in nationality studies. And everyone, if you read one language, if you read Russian, you could read all of the newspapers because they were all in the like it was everything was just one newspaper article translated into every regional language. And so you have this entire field that says that I understand Georgia because I read the Soviet materials in Georgia. And now, I mean, we still live with the artifacts of that. We still live with the legacy of that. Like the people who then
Well, I think this war is part of the legacy of that. Um, the reason why Putin in many ways has been so successful with that NATO argument is because we have always been deprived the independent identity, right? The identity that was detached from the identity of the colonizer. So yeah, everything absolutely. And the West has always, even, the progressive liberal kind of well-meaning center, if we call it, or the West has always um, treated this part of the world through the Russian lens. All the bureaus were in Moscow. Everyone spoke Russian. They assumed it was okay to come up to you and speak in Russian. That has, I think, we everyone across the region really owes Ukraine for starting to change that, but it's not changed yet. But there's been like a significant shift. There is at least now in Western academia a little bit of a realization that you have to have, Ukraine studies department. But a lot of Georgian departments, if they exist, and there are not that many of them, they still live under the Slavic departments in Western academia, and the academia does drive the kind of the understanding of this part of the world because, I mean, look at all the yeah, Russian-speaking correspondence from Western papers that went through, and covered. So yeah, like it gives you like a certain angle, and then you use that frame and to look at the world. And that is, Moscow was the center, and the periphery wasn't really understood um and centered.
Yeah, no, no, and it's this very cynical, and this is like, speaking about like this Russian colonial perspective is like, yeah, Russia like had a very clever, I don't know, yeah, yeah, clever. Like I mean, like they really built a like a disinformation mechanism built on culture, that yeah, like comes to you and says, you congratulations, you're Russian, but whereas of course Western colonialism goes to you and says you're not white or you're not French or whatever, and so you are lesser than us. Um, and it's this very cynical thing because yeah, from I mean, I made this mistake coming to Ukraine. My origin story before I ended up at Ukrainer, the first reason I came to Ukraine was to learn Russian. I thought it was an appropriate thing to do to move to Kiev and to try to learn Russian.
Yeah, but after uh, the 2022 full-scale invasion, there were American universities who moved their Russian language programs to Tbilisi.
Mhm. Oh
So
yeah, yeah.
it goes on.
Yes. Yeah, no, 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 that's a bit that's exactly my point, is that, like, I understand from a fundamentally, like, basic level, like and I can tell you, I mean, I like I said, I did my master's at
Like I went to Senegal to learn French. Like we all have blind spots, right?
Oh, no, no, I mean,
And
but
that is the
you
same
grow.
thing as well.
Yeah, you learn and you grow, like, and you learn to understand that context much better. Again, it goes by going to the periphery, speaking to the people there, understanding their experiences, understanding that that they are, that they have the agency to tell you what exists in their lives, and that you don't, as a journalist or even just as a human being, like you don't have the like your role is not to go to them and explain to them what their reality is. And I think that this is a huge mistake that the West constantly makes. It's one that we make domestically in the US. Joe Biden telling the American people that actually the economy is doing great, it did not really work well. Trump doing the same thing now is not really working well because people understand their lived experiences. And it took me a very long time to learn those lessons. And I can tell you one prominent American academic who is in the field of Russian studies told me before I did my master's program that I think it's actually way more appropriate to study the region from the U.S. because then you're able to like have a more dispassionate and like I'm just like that makes no sense to me. Like that just like it was such a big red flag that I should have noticed. Um, but I mean, from your perspective, like how do we ex how do you go about explaining to, like, this class of, like, the, liberal moderate, in the US, about Russian colonialism, about, like, how do you, ease them into that understanding? Because it can be a challenge, I know.
I think by telling stories and increasingly, creating experiences that people want to engage in, and inviting a conversation and debate. I feel that there is a lot that can be done around just reframing. It doesn't all has to be like new stuff all the time. Like sometimes you need to help. Well, there's a great Schopenhauer quote that says the challenge is not to see what no one has ever seen, but to think differently about something that everyone has seen. I butchered it. But basically, the challenge is not to see a new thing, but to think differently about the thing that we've always known was there. And I think that's very much kind of the goal um, of our of a lot of the journalists that we do. I mean, like I can give you an example of, we just published an investigation into mm, Epstein files and eugenics. That was like, and his relationship with Peter Thiel, Epstein's relationship, and frankly, it was like no one else had picked up that story, but like it was there, right? So it's about kind of like taking a deeper look, looking at things differently, but also te- telling good stories. I also find that the responsibility to tell the story is in a way that people listen is on me. It's not my audience's responsibility to listen. So I think we live busy lives in a busy world, and I don't expect people to be preoccupied with what's happening with the protests in Georgia, or sadly, the war here or the war in Gaza. People don't have the bandwidth. So I think it's up to journalists and to the media to connect the dots and really explain how something that happens in these remote places connects to them and affects their lives too.
I think it goes back to what you were saying about how like you have like 15 seconds or a minute to get someone's attention, and that it's on you. Like you're the one who has to like you're the one engaging like interrupting their life, and it's your job to get them to engage. And the way I try to do it with Ukrainer is we really try. Like my goal, the way I think when we're putting together materials is I want to make it easier for a foreign audience to feel empathy. Like people want to empathize. People like it is a very human thing. Like people want to care for each other. This is why like community is so important to us. This is why we are so miserable when we're separated from community. Um, and so if you give people the ability to empathize, you don't have to do it like directly. It doesn't have to be like explicitly telling them this is you in this story. But if you can give people, if you can share Ukraine, in my case, through the lens that will resonate with that audience. And these are very different audiences, and identity is a very fluid thing. But that when you give people that like ability, like they will take it, and that's yeah. So I'm fully in line with you. Two more questions for you. One will be I want to ask about your Zec Festival, in particular. Um, what prompted you to co-found specifically that kind of festival? What prompted you to try to expand it? And then it means the day after tomorrow in Georgian. And how do you like when I because I also think the day after tomorrow, I think like we have to be building for the now and for the future, and we need to be thinking very but how do you like in such urgent times, like how do you even maintain that within yourselves, let alone help other people understand like the importance of the day after tomorrow?
Yeah, I so we started Zeg Festival in 2019 as a collaboration project with partners in Georgia, and we have since merged these teams, and it's now kind of part of like that larger living organism that has like a journalism part and events and Zeg part, and frankly, it started because we really liked each other and wanted to do something together, and we thought would be fun to throw a festival together. None of us have done that before. But so we got 300 people into a room that year, and I, personally felt we should not have done another journalism festival because those exist and they're excellent, and the world doesn't need another one. But I thought, I think one of the real problems with today's world is that all of us live in such narrow silos. So I thought it would be really fun. I, mostly I thought, we all thought like, who would it be fun to have dinner with? Like, who do we want to talk to? And we just invited people we really wanted to talk to. So we ended up with a room in where that had a neuroscientist and a philosopher and a historian and a journalist and a guy who made perfume and an artist, and it was eclectic and wonderful, and amazing conversations came out of it. And then everyone wanted to come back. So we did it again with a little pause because of the pandemic. And then we did it again. And it became very obvious, you know, there was an organic community that kind of built around it. And it's like we have an insane return rate. Like about 90% of people come back. And that thing that we had created really wanted to grow. So we started figuring out how to make it grow. So we're now growing. We're very determined not to um, grow the festival itself because part of the magic of it is how intimate it is. And if we scale it, then it will lose. There's a real mix. The speakers and attendees mix together, and so we started taking it out and doing this pop-up events. So that's what we're doing now, and kind of trying to connect that global community that we're building. Mm, I think the day after tomorrow part of it is actually really important, because in addition to being in silos, I think we live in the world where we're so reactive. We're constantly are pulled into reacting all the time. Even like our obsession with solutions, like we need solutions, solutions, solutions. Like maybe sometimes you don't need a solution, right? So we never, and because of that, we end up living in the world where we have very little space for imagination, or rather, there's plenty of imagination, but imagination is currently monopolized by people who are creating the digital systems that are helping the autocrats, right? Silicon Valley is very much in bed with this like new type of authoritarianism, and they certainly have a lot of imagination. It's incredible what they've come up with. So I think, I think being in that mode of like, let's not worry about tomorrow. Let's like give ourselves both a permission and space to think about the day after and think about what we want that to be. There is the goal of zeg is never to come up with solutions or concrete things. It's literally to give yourself a space for imagination, and it seems to resonate with people. They want to come back.
I'm a big fan of reading different essays by different like intellectuals historically, and I've recently this year I've been reading a lot of Ursula K. Le Guin, and she talks about that so much about how she has an entire essay. I forget the title of it, but she makes the argument that if we want to live in a just world, we have to imagine what that looks like first. Like we don't know what that looks like. Is it even possible to live in a just world? And so first it starts with imagining, and that's if even if we want to combat injustice, we need to understand what justice in this context looks like. Otherwise, what are we even like? What's the purpose of any of it? And actually, that same essay has one of those a quote that the quote that you mentioned also reminds me of, which is you said the quote about how it's not about trying to find something new; it's about trying to see something a different way. And Ursula K. Le Guin, she has a beautiful quote that says, "If once you have seen injustice, you can never unsee it, and now from that point forward, you are always either complicit or you're resisting." And I think that also
Oh
speaks to
yeah,
why
that's
people,
very good actually.
yeah, that,
That is very
I think
good.
that also speaks to why a lot of people refuse to see certain things.
Yeah, that's very good. Hold on, I have it here. The task is not so much to see what no one yet has seen, but to think what nobody yet has thought about that which everybody sees.
Exactly.
That's the
Exactly.
Schopenhauer.
Exactly. No, no, it all ties together in my view. Last question for you. Very last question. So, and this is what I like to ask everybody because we are in such a terrible, terrible, unstable like time. We're all very busy. We're all trying to like in our own individual way try to save the world in one way or another. What do you do to ground yourself and to not like have to actually experience the weight of the work that you do? And like, is it slop YouTube videos? Is it certain types of music? Is it painting?
Painting. No, it's not painting. I find the doom scrolling as hard as I can, but sometimes I fail. What do I do? I think um, the usual things. I read not as much as I used to. That's also true. That's part. Think you're asking me a really tricky question. What do I do? Um, uh, I think the social life. I think friends and people that I connect with, and meeting new people that I connect with, that have stories to tell that I find interesting. Like engaging with people who are, I mean, the world is still full of people who are doing really inspiring work, and it's really fun to learn about it.
I think that's like the best way to bookend this interview, where you started by saying, well, I got into this because I like people. And you effectively ended it by saying, I relax by liking people.
I also revealed that I have no hobbies, which is quite sad. That's because I
That's
work
not,
so much.
if if I'm being sincere, I think that like you have the kind of job that you love, and I think that you probably do a lot of things in the process of just working that are relaxing for you. I mean, like I'm guessing that when you take interviews, you probably like that's a really sense of like sincere just joy for you. So I wouldn't regret that. I think that like it's beautiful that you're in that position. So that's how thank you so much for joining
Thank you
us,
for having me.
for having your time, for thank you for giving us your time. And we want to thank the Lviv Media Forum for helping organize this interview, for helping like connect you with us. Just a huge fan of your work, a huge fan of everything that you do. So very, very much appreciate you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.